Okay, now we enter part 3 in this, and we're looking again at this study here that it shows. Uh, People try to bring up people like Soy Keaton right here, and he's a known Afrocentric. He kind of shills that way and so on. And they talk about how he only analyzed 8 short tandem loci or STR data that's on there, and that actually wouldn't be correctly. Now, he took that off the data that Hawass and other studies had given to him. And again, I've shown you where they knew that his haplogroup was R1b long ago because people actually knew the system that they were using and stuff. It's one of the major ones, and so it easily pointed it out. And that's R1b, and yes, that's R1b he's pointing at right here. But then it also shows that his study was investigated on these things, where the second of these studies described above had investigated the Y haplogroups, or male, and genetic kinship of Ramses as an unknown man buried along with the royal cache at Del Erbari. Kita analyzed the STR data from these studies using an algorithm that only has 3 choices, strangely: Eurasians, Sub-Saharan Africans, and East Africans. Using these 3 options, Kita concluded that the majority of the samples of population had an affinity with Sub-Saharan Africans in one affinity analysis out of all the ones he tried. And of course, he wanted to go with that one because it shows they have an affinity. Of course, anybody that look at this data say, well, that's from admix. And Egyptologist 7 has done one on every single different tribe population that's around East Africa and West Sub-Saharan Africans and so on, showing you how much admix that they have from people, which is not a readily reported thing, but Kita cautioned that this does not mean that the royal mummies lacked other affiliations, which are shown with the R1b with their actual haplogroup. See how that works? Which he argued had been obscured in typological thinking. Kita further added that different data and algorithms might give different results. Yes, it's kind of well known now that you have to use at least some 24 to 28 different loci, or you're not going to get anything, information that's all over the place. Like his only included 3, and it didn't include North African Caucasians or Mediterranean type people, Middle Easterns versus this versus that. And sure, something would seem obscure and stupid if you were to try to take an Amerindian DNA or some DNA that was from an Eskimo and try to put it in there, but you get enough loci in there and your information data to go cross-reference against, and you actually get something that's viable information. And strangely, after this was all debunked way back in 2010, 2012, you'll still see blacks in videos over 11 years later pretending that they don't understand how it works, but just trying to show you something that Kita tried to show one time, where even in his own statements say, oh, that's not saying it didn't lack affiliations and this, that, and the other, and so on. But none of it shows actual Bantu ancestry whatsoever, so that's quite telling whenever that's the type of people that keep trying to push this issue. Let's continue on. So he wants to show you next that one of the people that commented on his videos, which is surely an Afrocentric, wants to say that everybody moves the goalpost somehow. I love how every time their lies get debunked, they move the goalpost and create another lie. Well, that seems to be the modus operandi of these black people that are trying to make these claims. And whenever they do, they really self-expose, because whenever pushed on an issue, they either want to try to talk over you and just make that go away, which doesn't make that happen. This isn't 2nd grade anymore. Or the fact that they just try to bring up something else, as opposed to like, oh, wait on a minute. We have to agree that you agree that this has been debunked. It doesn't have near the claim that you think it does on this point. Well, they just go on to another point, and then they pretend that they won that one that they were totally losing on, and continue to move goalposts around, just blowing hot steam and BS. Whenever the Bantu type people that are pushing this type issue don't have any affiliations with anybody except by admix. It's pretty self-exposing, but so he even shows in here that the mystery of King Tut's Spanish and European ancestors in these different types of showings and the recreation of King Tut. And they say, well, I don't like that. How about the median tone red type thing? And you go, okay, well, red is not black. Even in those pictures, you have a more caucasoid phenotype, but you can tell that that's been Egyptianized. You can even see it in Roman times whenever they did an Egyptian statue of one of those Romans. It's all smoothed off and changed from what you can see other reliefs of their face and stuff, busts that are done by certain people and so on. But whenever they Egyptianize it, it always get this effect. A lot of which is just that thickness around the eyes and so on like that. But there are other things that can be shown with that. But this is what King Tut would have looked like. And of course, they threw a fit whenever this came out. But it actually shows that Western Europeans are more connected to the ancient Egyptians than anybody on Earth at this point. And of course, in ancient times, and used to be ancient Anatolians, showing you the demographic that was in ancient Anatolia versus what it is now when it's been renamed Turkey with all the Turkish populations and so on that are there now that thousands of years ago weren't in effect.
You know when a melty grilled cheese sounds so good, but so does a bacon burger with creamy pepper.
2012 DNA tribes. In January 2012, DNA tribes conducted the first significant study that reverberated across the globe.
DNA tribes is one of these places that are known for only checking 8 loci and then trying to send you something like, you might be related to King Tut. You might be related to Ramses the Great. They've done to a lot of black people. Why is that? Well, a lot of black people have E1B genetics. But E1B1B and E1B1A are totally different than each other. Surely, or they wouldn't be able to denote the difference between the two or differentiate. But then whenever we have that type of concept, it's because of admix. It's well known. Prior to Astellar, man, at 4400 BC, blacks still had a Homo erectus type skull formation. There were only 4 foot tall people or so, like Iwu Iliru and anything else that's been found. It'll tell you in Astellar, man, that's the modern version that we have of blacks, where they have a vaulted cranium due to that admix from an already modern people that had a much larger brain. That's quite telling.
The meticulous analysis of mummies from the 18th dynasty unveiled a startling connection to Central and West Africans.
No, it actually didn't. Well, whenever you try to go through DNA tribes and you get 8 loci, it does all kinds of crazy things. And then, of course, somebody else is already running through this machine doing a debunk, and they go, no, it doesn't even show what they lie and try to say that it shows.
The revelation was further. They failed to mention that despite carrying the O1b haplogroup, the royal family's autosomal DNA revealed a stronger connection to Central, West, and Southern African populations. In essence,
blacks really don't like their West Sub-Saharan Africa, and they're willing to put all this crap together to try to say East Africans that aren't related to might have done something special. It's just like trying to take something away from Caucasians if they could somehow, but then they claim we as if they are related to or even knew any of this existed, which is also real self-exposing, because it kind of shows, well, we didn't, but those over there did. But then they try to say we.
They were African O1b carriers. We know that O1b has a long history in Africa, as mentioned in a previous segment.
Yeah, and I've shown this before, and the expanse of it. And whenever you see blurbs in places you don't think it should be, that's just because you don't know they had been there in ancient times. Over here in West Eurasia and all the way through Eastern Asia, and you can see in swathing the area of China today and leading up into Kamchatka and places headed towards Alaska. But over here on the left, you can see how dark it is right there. Now, sure, it's taken over an area of sub-Saharan Africa that they show down here with a V88, but we can also discern easily how that comes out because R1B is known for being from Aryan type people. And there is no, well, these over here just pop it up like magic somehow. That's not how any of this works. And I think even the person that's even crudely, remotely understanding genetics can understand that easily.
Many African populations carry this haplogroup while also exhibiting physical characteristics associated with indigenous African populations.
And this is admix that's taken over, and then one would have to ask, what would they look like before or prior to these admixing events? Well, in the West Sub-Saharan Bantu type people that didn't even know Egypt existed or anything, that keep trying to pull this, they were a 4 foot tall, football headed type people. We can also find that that was still existent in East Africa quite a bit longer than it was in a lot or really any other place in the world, pretty much. Let's continue.
So, these factors make it less likely that they were white Europeans coming to Africa to build civilizations, as the...
No, actually, that's exactly what the true DNA shows, as I showed in the last video, where they even talk about a Nordic skull type people, and before they had genetics to prove it again, they still had all of this showing up, and all these blonde mummies, light-haired mummies, all mixed into these people, mainly in the nobility here, blue-eyed statues that I've shown over and over again in my videos. Just look up crystal blue, or look up blue-eyed Egyptians, or blue-eyed Egyptian statues, so you'll knock out any riffraff, and you'll actually see that in the dynasties, earliest dynasties leading up to the time, there are blue-eyed Egyptians shown in there, and of course Caucasians, and the way that they kept their lineages going and how it ran on through there, and that there was a Nordic type people, which I've showed in the last video too. So this doesn't show you that they somehow popped up with popcorn and came up with something new or some special variant of R1b that would pinpoint them somehow. It pinpoints who actually was the admixture in this event. And then, of course, anybody that had the larger brains and so on kind of took over. And let me state again, this wasn't a one-time event, or it wouldn't be showing up to the level that it is, and haplogroups taking over everybody and so on. Let's continue.
The depictions further confirm. Now, the goalposts have shifted from Or1b to Or1a. But why?
No, the goalpost didn't shift at all, actually, and you easily understand the fact that, well, they weren't talking about the right one. Whenever the kid said it and he repeated it, that isn't exactly what was really going on now, was it? So to harp on something that we all know is wrong and a misstatement, instead of R1b as being R1a, but whenever we say R1 anything, we know who we're talking about. Genetics points it out to be the Aryan type people. So as far away from the sub-Saharans they tried to claim as you could possibly be in humanity. Let's continue.
What significance does this hold? Well, the Or1 haplogroup is distributed across a vast Eurasian region, extending...
So here's R1a, and you can see it also is swathing much more in Europe, up through Russia and places, and higher than that, but also in the ancient Levant too, because it's a variation of the theme of that same song, if you will. But they also show it being in Egypt, leading into the first part, just up there in the northeastern corner. But you can see how much it's taken over India too. And I've got other videos about that, and the fact that they realize it now, that it can't be denied now. So all of this that we're showing today cannot be denied, but we're in the middle of a video where he's trying to deny it and keep pointing at black people and saying we, that they aren't even related to. Yeah, let's continue.
From Scandinavia and Central Europe to Central Asia, Southern Siberia, and South Asia. It barely touches the extreme north of Africa. If this becomes the prevailing narrative, it would make it impossible for King Tut and ancient Egyptians to be considered black, as this lineage does not...
No, it would also make it, if it was R1b, which is what it is, or any other haplogroup, such as E1b, that's associated with Caucasians, that drives from Eurasian CT and you're down a path to Eurasian atom back into the Cro-Magnon types, which they find that haplogroup still exists too, of the oldest that they found so far, that they could get DNA out of a Puglisi cave at about 29,000 BC. So where did all this miraculous changing come about? And people have realized that's not how it worked. Watched a video last night where a guy in another whole series of ways debunks the out of Africa theory, and also he's showing a few of these ancient hominids that were around well before, and in fact it looks like the oldest ones are out of rather than in that we found so far. Sure, you might dig up and find something, but scientists are coming to a different conclusion. Like that same conclusion I showed whenever in West Sub-Saharan Africa before 4400 BC, they don't find anything except for a still extant hominid type people. But they do have a Negroid phenotype, and they've made the connections with that, with Chris Stringer's video about it exactly, trying to explain it in as cordial a way as he can. But R1A and R1B, now just mentally think of this if you saw the other video. If we were to overlap both of those things and show you these extremely close related Caucasians at a time, we would be looking at a swath that covers, some 85% of what we're looking at, and where it's really lacking at is all over Sub-Saharan Africa, actually. But it is much more in North Africa. And those are connections that go with ancient Phoenicians and people like that too, that actually knew Egypt existed. Let's continue.
Exist among black populations. This narrative transforms African Egyptians into Scandinavian Egyptians, which is...
No, it just shows you that what we're finding with genetics, and people have talked about all along, but there was a period of time there after World War II where they tried to say it's racist if you try to show that it's Nordic people that were even mixed into there, or only Caucasians, or this, that, and the other. And it's like, I don't care about your current NWO narrative you want to go with. This is true and real archeology. It doesn't turn them into Scandinavians, although Scandinavians did have that R1A haplogroup, and it's still extremely strong today. And I've shown other videos how that works out through time, and before the times that we're even talking about, well before, just right before writing in Egypt, though, but it goes back much further. In fact, there are connections to Göbekli Tepe and people that are living over 30,000 years ago in places that are so much more advanced than other people that you could look at that time. It's crazy. But then when you see from there to there where it starts blurring out in areas, and then those people end up having a civilization in a short amount of time, and so do these. And we looked at India and a few other places. There were people, though, like in a land of the lost, that really didn't have any of these interactions very much, and due to that, it's 4400 BC before they even have a modern brain structure, but they didn't start coming on strong with anything. You can look at videos now today where in the bush they're still a pre-Neolithic people, whereas we've looked at other things that show 30,000-year-old lithics and past, and other mythologies that seem to be already woven into the idea. Astronomy and all kinds of things.
Is a falsehood. King Tut belonged to a 1B, and his autosomal DNA connected him and his family to Central, West, and Southern Africans.
No, it only connected with that stupid trying DNA tribes 8 loci idea. When you run it through on 24, it says, oh, there were ancient Near Eastern people right there. Anatolian type people, just like DNA keeps showing everything. So their women were from there, and their males seem to stem from a place right above the Caucasus Mountains. Isn't that strange? Let's continue.
Aslan should have fact-checked his information before creating that video.
Blacks should check this information before they make the video, but if they did, they'd never make a video because they realize it's all a lie. So what they do is they try to discount things and then show stuff that doesn't even really come into effect if they aren't looking at the correct loci. It's like, hey, these people over here said da-da-da from this one table in their stuff. Yeah, that's been well debunked. Why are you still showing that? Why would you show something like, well, this is a lie, and then turn around and go, this is the way it is? See how that works out? It's so self-exposing.
While he often produces engaging content, when he ventures into discussing Kemet, things tend to get messy.
So now he's trying to even debunk the debunker that he brought on in the video that has a Middle Easternish type mixed look to him. because he mistakenly said R1A after that kid said R1A when they really meant R1B. Is R1A not found in Egypt too? Oh, I bet it is. But one thing else we can all bet on and probably make more money off of is the fact that Bantu DNA isn't there whatsoever. And any connections they try to pull off by saying things like this or E1B and Ramses and so on is due to admix. Everybody's well aware of it. All the other people that connect to E are all Caucasians. We can see how that works, but they don't like that, science and so on. In an age where they try to use science, well, let's just say when they attempt it, it falls on its face, they try to misinterpret it and so on, and it tends to get a little messy.
Now, let's address the final part of his video.
In my opinion, if you want to know what ancient Egyptians looked like, just look at modern Egyptians.
Okay, I just showed you in the last segment a recent video that says, well, the modern Egyptians are more akin to ancient Anatolians rather than the current demographic there, and modern Western Europeans. This showing you clearly who it was and that there's only 1% connection to the current one. So if he's saying, look at the people here today and pretend it was there 2,000 to 5,000 years ago, that's not the demographic, and genetics has come and championed that idea and said, no, that's not the way it works at all. But why does he throw that in the video then? Well, he's got some little debunk he's going to try to give onto this idea of, where look at the modern ones, that's exactly what was there. A lot of that's contingent, but a lot of these people have admix and things that weren't going on back in the ancient demographic. We have that same problem in the Near East and in the Levant and the Holy Lands and so on too, as well as ancient Anatolia, you can see. So trying to point at it and say it's the same, we'll try to do that with Amerindians. Well, 2,000 years ago, it was the people that were here. Well, no, you can't say that. Just like you can't say it in Egypt. And surely black people that are Bantu origin that didn't even know Egypt existed at this time to claim that they were there first or anything like that is really a showing of their jealousy and envy and lack of wanting to go with anything that's reasonable that anyone would agree with. Let's continue.
They are the direct descendants.
This portion is the reason I created the following videos. If you're interested in uncovering the truth, I highly recommend watching them.
Well, if you want to joke, you can do that. See, that's where they're showing that comedian that's there on the right versus the guy on the left here up top. Is one of those comedians. Hey, I like him, he's fantastic, he's funny or not, but he tried to pull that we was the Egyptians and not ourselves. And of course, Egypt actually told him, don't even come here for your concert then. Then the bottom one is the one he showed earlier in this video where they take a stretched out Narmer statue and try to point and say this, that, and the other. Well, that's not even a real, true, non-verified statue in any way. It wasn't found in situ, and they can't, by that, claim it. Whereas they can claim Narmer palettes and all the things like that where they find them at. When you get something off of some guy in a bizarre type situation that there's going on, sneaky behind the look, yeah, that's not the same thing. Of course, why would you have to take that and stretch out sideways the video if it really did look like black people? Oh, we want to pretend. Look, this is real life we're talking about, not pretend, but
I delve deep into the subject, addressing studies typically overlooked by mainstream sources.
If they're overlooked, it's because they really don't have any truth in them, to the point that no one should listen to this because it's exactly opposite of what everything shows. And who is it put out by? Oh yeah, you really shouldn't look at that information. 8 loci isn't going to give you anything. And if you try to cut it down to 3 demographics and say Caucasians weren't always in the Middle East, Near East, or across the north of Africa or in Egypt, and it throws it out there and it says, oh, they were people from Africa. And they go, see, it was us. And it's like, no, Africa was named by Caucasians. Before it was all called Libya. They don't have any ground to stand on, but they feel like they're standing on a mountain. Well, that mountain is made of excrement, and everybody's watching them, and they're acting so proud of their lie. It's gotten disgusting, really.
After watching these videos, I encourage you to form your conclusions.
After watching these videos, I encourage you to form your conclusion on the fact that they can't handle reality and really would like to have some Caucasian history that went on here and made the pyramids rather than a pre-Neolithic up until modern times with admix, and then basically owe everything they know and their whole modernity and everything they want to the Caucasians that invented it all, which is the fact of the way it is. But they can't handle that. They're busy trying to pry themselves into civilizations they have no affinity for and didn't even really know existed. How self-exposing could that be?
I don't want to dictate your perspective, even though I can be quite assertive about my beliefs sometimes.
No, you want to exactly dictate that. In fact, you want to go, yeah, you may have seen the truth, but let me show you these lies and twisted pictures and blah, 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 and a cartoon or two.
I want you to critically analyze the data and decide what makes the most sense. Now, the data and decide what makes the most sense. Now, let's talk about anthropology. As I explained earlier, a person's appearance is determined by their phenotype, which, in turn, is defined by their bone structure.
Yeah, just skeletons and things. Like you can see like prognathism, which is where they have a lower jaw below the nasal structure that sticks out much more than other humans that they can't find in ancient Egypt because they don't have prognathism. That's where the modern type people that don't have any prognathism in the world are there. And then they're sitting here with this more simian ape-like appearance to their jaw form going on to them, which looks like a remnant still kept from the Homo erectus type form, which was much more exaggerated back then. So everything's been an upgrade to them, and they want to act like everybody's trying to make a downgrade to us. And it's like, no, we're just trying to show the truth, but you can't handle it.
This leads us to the field of anthropology.
In the field of anthropology, we're looking at this skull right here. You see no subnasal prognathism. That's the way Egyptian skulls look like. Some of them in their skull structure above that show a longer-headed Mediterranean type people. Other ones show a Nordic type people that were there at the time. And I even showed you where it blustered again. The two most famous parts of Egypt were shown clearly through that whole duration, being ruled by a Nordic type people, and we can look at them today and see their blonde and red hair and so on going on. But he wants to pretend that didn't exist or whatever. It's got something to do with black people that didn't even know Egypt existed. Again, self-exposing. Let's continue.
Anthropology. While genes can provide hints about someone's facial features, such as eye and hair color, to truly
Yep, and genetics can actually prove it and so on. But if they have statues of the earliest Egyptians that look kind of like this and even have blonde hair and the mummy right over there and their own statues that they affirmed were crystal blue-eyed, what would you try to say? Well, they weren't as light as these people. They had red ochre males and pale females. Well, yeah, so does the Greeks, Mitanni, Sumerians, all kinds of people, Minoans, Etruscans, everything through this time because they could keep a woman pale, so they show pale women and red ochre males. It's shown in Egypt too, but they want to pretend like it's different there somehow. How much you want to bet this guy would have a pretty good tan if he lived in Egypt 24/7 and only wore something that looked like a kilt? How pale could his woman be if they kept her out of the sun pretty much? Pretty damn pale. Let's continue.
understand what they look like, we rely on anthropology. So, what does anthropology reveal about the appearance of ancient Egyptians?
Well, every recreation so far is showing a Caucasian type people, and strangely, right before the DNA information came out showing all these Nordic type people and so on, they were making them look kind of like the demographic looks today a little bit, a little more ethnic. Now you don't see that as so much, and of course people that did King Tut didn't show anything like that.